Shopify helps you sell at every stage of your business. Like that, let's put it online and see what happens stage.
And the site is live.
That we opened a store and need a fast checkout stage.
Thanks. You're all set.
That count it up and ship it around the globe stage.
This one's going to Thailand.
And that, wait, did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Whatever your stage, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen.
Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Wayne Cowan, and you're listening to Attitude Magazine's weekly ADHD Experts audio broadcast. If you're a parent of a child diagnosed with ADHD or learning disabilities or even autism spectrum disorder, you know how challenging making friends can be. I think some of the most heartfelt, moving letters and emails we receive here at Attitude have to do with children who have no friends or who feel left out and disliked because they haven't been invited to a birthday party or another social event. It just breaks parents' hearts, and it makes children feel very bad about themselves. Today's topic, Why Don't I Have a Best Friend?, will be of great interest to many parents. We will get lots of practical ideas and strategies for helping a child make and keep friends. Today, we're very fortunate to have Fred Frankel with us. Fred is author of Friends Forever, How Parents Can Help Their Kids Make and Keep Friends. Fred has also directed the Parenting and Children's Friendship Program at UCLA for almost 3 decades. Today, Fred will give parents tips and a game plan to help your child make and keep friends. Everything from how playground behavior affects friendships, games to exclude during playdates, whether to include siblings in the playdates, and how to network with other parents when looking for a potential friend for your child. So with that introduction, let me turn it over to Fred, and thanks again for being here, Fred.
Well, thank you very much, Wayne. It's a pleasure being here again. I just want to reiterate, actually, that I have 3 children. I've been through this twice. I have a 30-year-old son, and I have 2 adopted children, and one of them actually is in the first picture, the first slide. The little blonde kid over there on the right is my youngest, who is now she's now 9 years old. And we've seen a bunch of parents over the years, and you're so right about the heart-wrenching parts of friendships and difficulties. So let's define what we mean by a best friendship. It's a very special relationship. It's just about the same as true love for children. It's a mutual relationship. That means kids choose to be friends with each other, formed with affection and commitment so that, if there's minor squabbles, they get over it and go on and continue to be friends between people who consider themselves as equals. A friendship is an equal kind of a relationship. It's not a mentorship between an older and a younger. It's usually same age or within a year or so of each other. And research shows that best friendships are the most enduring social outcomes of middle childhood. And why have best friends? Well, you need somebody to do something with, activity companions. At recess, it's somebody you can hang out with. It's somebody who will give you instrumental support, like homework assignments that you miss during class, emotional support when you're feeling bad, and also they're the best way you have of learning about your peer group is through your best friends and with your best friends. And best friends help you continue to acquire social competence throughout your life. Best friends, and again, this is the results of research showing that best friends buffer the impact of stressful events. We had an earthquake here in 1994. I was on a hotline, and the public schools made the mistake of, there were a couple of schools that were in terrible shape, and so they had to send the kids to other schools, and they did that regardless of friendships, and the children were having lots of trouble without their best friends. It reduces stress associated with divorce. It protects against loneliness and victimization by peers so that in terms of bullying and being a victim of bullying, much less likely if you have a group of friends to hang out with. They protect you, and it's harder to get to you when you're in a crowd. They decrease anxiety and depression as much as 10 years later. Kids who had best friendships at 12. There was a New Zealand study showing that when you come back at age 22, the kids who had the best friends were doing better and not feeling anxious, not feeling depressed. And it also improves self-esteem, and I'll show you a study later on in my presentation that demonstrates that. And there's a cute little study pairing best friends with kids who barely knew each other. And what they did was took them aside before the study and taught them diametrically opposed rules to a game they were about to play. So they engineered an argument between these two kids. And what happened was the best friends quickly resolved the rule discrepancy, went on to play the game, and actually increased their measures on measures of social competence. And the kids who barely knew each other never got past the rule conflict and didn't like each other very much afterwards and did not increase their levels of social competence. This is a study we did with children with attention deficit disorder in the public school systems. We gave them 12 weeks of our friendship program, and we measured their self-esteem, and that's the CFT group on the left. And what happens is they had one level of self-esteem. In the middle, just afterwards, they had a little better, and then at 16-week follow-up, they had even better self-esteem. And then we had a sham group as a control group where we only taught them self-esteem without improving their friendships. And of course, it did work right away, as most self-esteem interventions do. And then at 16-week follow-up, the self-esteem was actually worse than at baseline. And then there was no change in our waitlist control. So that the best way to improve self-esteem is to have a best friend, the most enduring way. Another study we did where we looked at kids on the school playground, and we asked their mothers how many times have they hosted a play date in the last month. And the correlations were quite stunning. The number of invited play dates correlated a little bit with how much they played with others on the playground. But the number of times they hosted play dates was a huge correlation, highly significant, 0.65 in terms of how much they were playing with each other. So Again, the best way is to arrange play dates, best with kids from your child's school, and I'll show you how to do that later on in this talk. And what you'll find is that they won't be as lonely. They'll have kids to hang out with at recess. So we've organized a training program based on actual developmental observation by developmental psychologists on how kids go about making friends. The first step is to meet kids to begin with and how to join other kids already at play. There are two skills that children should have. One is how to get into somebody else's play in a way in which you'll be accepted, and also accepting entry bids or requests from other children to join your play. And then also in terms of establishing a positive reputation among peers, that's step 2. They have to learn how to play the games that the other kids are playing. And what I found is kids with attention deficit disorder actually don't have much problem with this. They know all the games. The problem becomes in being a good sport. And then there's a very special conversation that they have when they first get to know other kids. We call it playing detective. Is really finding out or looking for common ground interests that they're both interested in. My little daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, happens to be interested in Harry Potter, and she goes and seeks out other kids who are also interested in Harry Potter, and that's what they talk about at recess. So you have to have something that's in common, that's kind of an interest, a burning interest, in order to attract friends. And then here comes the hard part, is transitioning a friend who you have at school into one that you see at home. Very important for self-esteem. Very difficult transition, but it really helps children immensely. And this is a two-pronged kind of thing. One is that the children develop the interests and they point to who they want to have a play date with. And secondly, the parents kick in and network to make these play dates after school. And finally, the success is not just in having a play date, but in the play date being successful. And the way we teach children is the rules of a good host, being a good host, avoiding conflict, and making your guests feel good for being at your house. And the parent skill is supervising and making sure this happens, that the rules of a good host are not violated. And so this is the very important conversation we're talking about, where you're establishing common interests. You know, what do you have? What do you want to do together? And by the way, adults need to do this step too. If you want to make friends with somebody, one of the first things you have to do in the first conversations is to establish what you have in common so that you can arrange to get together over your common interests the next time you get together. So these are the rules. To trade information means to give an important fact or get an important fact. And we teach them how to keep the conversation going. When you answer a question, they have to ask a question to keep the trade going. So you're finding out, the idea is to find out about the other child and also talk about yourself. And what you want to find out is what they like to do and what don't they like to do. So that when you have a play date, you have activities that you can already point to that you're setting up to organize, and you know exactly what to do. Your feet are hitting the ground when the play date starts. The errors that children make are conversation hog. They don't let the other person talk. And the way to resolve that is give only the facts the person asked for and give the other person a chance to speak. So when we have parents monitor a phone call, and we do this over the phone so the parents can be right there, they're listening for giving facts on their end and silence on their end as their child listens to the other child speak. The other thing is not to get too personal. Don't give information that will make you or others uncomfortable. Don't talk about personal stuff when you first get to know each other. We call this intimacy regulation. Adults have it too. You talk about superficial things when you first know somebody, and then you have a little trial balloon where you say something a little bit intimate and see if it's reciprocated. And if it is, you go on to become more intimate. And if it isn't, you stay there at that level. And last, don't be an interviewer. Don't only ask questions and not tell about yourself. You want also to educate the other child on what you like too. Now we move on to the play date and how to structure that. And the first thing is the activities on the play date are very important. So you want to set it up so that your child is playing activities where there's fluid in and out of it, where they can go with the flow, they can accept the other child's wishes more readily to change the activity so that they're doing something that both of them like. And what gets in the way of that are obsessions. I had one little girl who was so hooked on Barbie dolls that she wouldn't play with anything else. And when her friend got tired, or playmate got tired of playing with it, she just kept on going, and the friend walked away, basically bored. Pokemon trades, well, this is a little dated, but trades of things, because somebody might get the raw end of the deal on the trade. You shouldn't be playing provocative games the first play date. This is an error that children with ADHD sometimes make. Shooting water pistols, somebody gets shot in the eye, gets all upset, martial arts toys, and so on. And finally, solitary or parallel activities really have no place on a play date. Reading books, watching TV where you're just silently watching together, or videotapes. I modify it a little bit for girls. The drawing or art and crafts activities is something girls can handle a little better than boys. They're drawing and interacting with each other while they're drawing. But sometimes boys just get off in their own little world and start to ignore their guests when they're playing, when they're drawing and doing arts and crafts. And also arts and crafts typically use the parent to structure it. And what we advocate is the parent get out of the play and only stay as a supervisor. And if the kids really have good chemistry together, they'll come up with the things to do. and they'll keep each other busy. That's actually a good measure of whether you've selected the right peer and whether things are going well. So now here are the more formal steps of a play date. The children play detective and figure out if there's something another kid that they like, they have in common. We advocate making a phone call, which children don't typically do, but it's a great way of finding out whether they're liked or not. If you're received with enthusiasm on the phone call, then you picked the right peer. And if you're not, then you've picked the wrong peer and it's time to move on. Your child makes the invitation on the phone, and then the parents get into the act, and they get on the phone and make the day and time of the play date. Immediately before the play date, you keep the toys that'll cause conflict out of it. You hide them, basically, and you set up the games that they agree to play on the phone call. You exclude video games, watching TV, or computer games. And this initially makes quite a few of our kids upset and parents worried. But after that first play date where they haven't done any electronics, it's really worth the battle to make sure. And one way we advocate doing this is to make the parent the bad guy, that the parents don't allow it. Sorry, but my parents don't allow it. I'm on restriction, whatever it takes to keep the games out. And then there are the rules of a good host. And this is kind of interesting because the kids understand some of the rules intrinsically about a good host. And so that's the way you should have it, is if you're inviting kids over to your house, which you should do at the beginning of friendships, they're the host and the other child is the guest. And right away that sets some of the parameters. The guest gets to pick the games. The guest also gets to change the activities. And you also get to do it too, but you have to do it politely and suggest, after this next turn, can we do something else? And also before the play date, you put away those activities that you don't want the guest to touch or whatever. I remember my son at 5 years old just put together a Lego battleship, and he wanted to show it to his friend. And I said, well, your friend might want to touch it or take it apart and put it together. Is that okay? And then, of course, he said, no! And so we hid the battleship in the closet. And actually, when I first tried this rule on my son, I was afraid that all of his toys would be in our walk-in closet hidden away. But to my surprise, there were only 3 or 4 games that he wouldn't allow touching. And so sharing wasn't an issue after that. And, of course, don't criticize the guest and be loyal to the guest. And that means if the guest wants to stop playing, then you go play with whatever he wants. And also another thing that most parents don't consider is, what if another child rings the doorbell and comes in while they're on the play date? What do you do with that? And that's another way you can be loyal to your guest, is to have the child go to the door, the parents go to the door, and just say, I'm busy right now. I'll get back to you later. Thanks for stopping by. In other words, you don't invite a third child into a play date because 3 just don't work for kids. 2 are playing and 1 gets left out. And also, if you're invited over to somebody's house, you expect to be, like royalty. You're the one, unless, of course, you're organizing a party where you're informing everybody that there's more kids around. A play date should really be a one-on-one experience. Now, of course, if you have siblings, that becomes a little more difficult. We advocate siblings not be included in a play date for 2 reasons. One is all of a sudden you're playing with a sibling or doing babysitting or whatever, and you're not getting to know the other kid. And also, what we find is kids who have no friends sometimes have very competent siblings who steal the friend when they come over. That they're more socially competent, they muscle in, and then pretty soon they're playing with a friend, and the child you're most concerned about is left out. So those are 2 very good reasons to exclude siblings from play dates. And we have some suggestions for how to do that. You can make separate play dates at the same time. That's worked pretty well in my house. Again, I have two girls, and they have their own play dates sometimes at the same time, and it pretty much works okay. You just have to limit the territory. You can't go in this room and you can't go in that room, and then you pretty much keep them separate. Or you can have your spouse take the siblings that aren't on this play date out for somewhere for a while. And with older siblings, you can just tell them that they're not allowed on the play date. They're okay with it, usually. And mine are okay with it anyway. and Playdate is set up so that you're available to monitor. And you don't have to be right in the same room, but you have to be within listening distance to catch any conflict or any violations of a good host rule. And then you're ready to jump in to intervene on it. And that's what we call, and what teachers call a teachable moment, because you're intervening right at the time they're committing a social error, pulling them out so that maybe they're not embarrassed in front of their friend, talking to them about the error, having them promise not to do it again, and then they go back in the play date and hopefully don't repeat the error. And immediately after the play date, you're debriefing. You're saying, did you like the kid? Did you have a good time? Did you want to invite them over again? If you have a friendless child, you should probably stick to play dates in your house initially, just to make sure that they're not committing social errors before you let them go to somebody else's house. Because the other parents may not tell you that they're committing heinous social errors, but they don't invite you over and they don't want to speak to you again, whatever. So you definitely want to give them the trial runs at your house. So here's a part that many of you won't need. My wife is a flaming extrovert, and she doesn't really need to learn how to get to know other parents. She just does it very well. I'm on an introvert scale of 10, I'm a 10. And so a lot of this stuff has been difficult for me. And I've had to learn from trial and error, and cues from my wife, actually. She taught me everything I know. Anyway, qualities to look for. So first you want to choose the friend. You want friends that are behaviors acceptable. You want them to, because they're going to be teaching your child social skills too, so you want them to know what they're doing. And they have common play interests, and your child asks for play date with them, and maybe they also ask for play dates with your child. And also the other parents are people you can trust, so that when you send your child over to their house, they're not watching porn or whatever. So you want to check them out too. I'm exaggerating, of course. So step one, where to network. Actually, that's a nice picture on my slide of the mob of parents right before school drop-off. And that could be a good time because pretty much everybody's there. And then parents divide up into two groups, the stay-at-home moms and the moms that are working. And they kind of diverge. And what I find it's relatively hard for parents to cross over to try and make play dates with a stay-at-home mom if you're a working mom, because their time constraints are a lot different. And stay-at-home moms can schedule play dates right after school, whereas working moms have difficulty with that. So anyway, you can volunteer at fundraisers, parent meetings. The park is a good place to meet other parents if it's a local neighborhood park and there are people in your neighborhood. Religious services, Cub Scouts, Brownie Troop leader, and a T-ball or sports activities and practices. That's where you can do it. And then the way you do this is a low pressure kind of way. You don't want to make the other parent feel like you're pressuring them into play date. You want to make them proceed along lines that they are comfortable with. So the first thing you do is just introduce yourself. Hi, that's actually my wife's name, Susan, and whose mom it is and our place together. I just wanted to say hi. That's it. Now, if they pick up the ball and go further, that's great. Then you can go along with that. And if they don't, then you said hi. And they may not. And, parents may approach you also with that and say, hi, I'm so-and-so. And then the next thing to do is, be friendly, of course. And then afterwards, check with your child if you haven't already heard about this child and see if they actually want to play with them. So you don't want to do any matchmaking where the kids aren't involved. An integral part of meeting new kids is meeting kids that your child likes and wants to play with. Not all of them, but, some of them aren't necessarily good influences, but the ones that are, and you'll proceed along those lines. And then you kind of assess the response there. Were they friendly when you approached them? Did they have a warm tone of voice? If they're not receptive, just leave it alone. Let's see now, where's that? Okay, 4, the warm chat response. You certainly can start talking about what you have in common. You have your children in common, and chances are you both want to make play dates for them. So if you know the child well enough, you can start commenting or complimenting them, the other child, about their comments and so on. And you keep it relevant. so that something about the teacher would be good too. Those are all interesting stuff, or whatever you have in common wherever you're meeting. Something about the t-ball game, and ask what other kids do. Sports does Sam do? So actually, you're doing some of the play detective too, helping your child do that. And if things go well, then you can again go slowly and introduce the idea of a play date. And, maybe we could have a play date sometime. All right. So now you're leaving them, you're putting the ball in their court. And the way of, and if you're in the receiving end of this, a polite way of actually, you don't have to say yes when they say it. You can just say, yes, that's a great idea. We'll have to do that sometime. And actually, that's pretty much equivalent to a no. But a nice way to do it. All right. Because you don't always want to say yes and get trapped into something that you and your child might not want to be involved in. And by the way, not everybody should be friends with everybody else. There are kids that just the chemistry is terrible. Even if they enjoy each other's company, if they're getting into trouble together, that's pretty awful chemistry. So I guess I'm entertaining questions at this point.
Yes, we have loads of great questions, Fred. So I'm going to generalize about a few that have been asked by several parents. One is personal space issues. My daughter seems to struggle to play in a group unless she is the leader. What can I do to help her? She struggles with personal space boundaries. We have discussed the hula hoop space. Imagine they have a hula hoop around them and don't enter that space unless invited. But she insists that they like the attention. But she's really turning off a large number of kids. So do you have any practical tips for personal space?
Yeah, actually. What age is the girl? Do you know?
It doesn't say. I would imagine 8 or 9.
Okay, let's just say it's 8 or 9. Actually, I hear more problematic about wanting to control the activity. That's much more deadly than personal space. And actually, girls can get closer than boys, by the way, to each other. Boys, personal space, it depends on what they're doing, but if they're just talking, actually, best friends have almost no personal space. I have videos of boys, best friends talking to each other and almost talking to each other. They're almost touching each other when they're talking. And girls, on the other hand, look at each other in the eye. And that's a common intervention for a social skills group, is to train eye contact, but actually boys don't do it. If you look, men don't do it either, by the way. And when I'm having coffee with somebody, I'm not constantly looking at him in the eye. Chances are we'll both get the willies if we do that. Whereas girls, on the other hand, I have a video of 2 best friend girls looking at each other and the heads don't move. If you fast forward, those heads are rock solid and the eyes are riveted on each other. And they're pretty close together. If it's an acquaintance, the distance is further away. But, the way to join is, and actually the way to help not being bossy is to take your child to a game where a place where other kids are playing and have them watch the other kids and tell you what's going on. And they really have to know that before they jump in. And the idea being that if they're jumping into other kids playing, they're helping them play the other kids' game. It's not their game. They shouldn't be in charge of the game. They shouldn't come in and take charge of anything. All right, if they're joining other kids. And that's the biggest way I think that kids get in trouble is they want to be the boss, they want to be in charge. And there's no give and take on that. And if the kids don't want to do what they do, they get very upset. So that's the issue to work on. I have a couple of chapters in my book on that. And maybe if I don't know if I should answer some more questions, and maybe some other questions will come up where I can answer more of that.
There was another one where a boy, I guess he's an 8-year-old, constantly hugging people, other, kids that he had just met. And, of course, it turned them off. I guess it's a similar issue, violating that personal space with acquaintances.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, there's an interesting thing that happens. Boys don't generally do that. And so that's an unusual behavior for boys. And it'll kind of creep them out, I think, if a kid comes up and starts hugging them. Again, because of their space. And that should be discouraged, with some kind of behavioral program where they get a consequence for doing it. The person's explained to them that you don't really do that to somebody you don't know, and you don't do it, you look at what the other boys are doing. They're not really doing it in your group, And so you shouldn't be doing it either because you might be making them feel bad, and that's the important thing is to make them feel comfortable. There's something that girls do, and actually it's something we noticed in our social skills group is girls who don't know each other, all of a sudden two girls will put their arms around each shoulder. And actually it isn't affection, it's ownership when it happens with girls with friendship problems. In other words, what they're doing is taking the girl, and then it's difficult for the other girl to get away once you have your arm around her shoulder. And also it's a message to the girls around, leave us alone, all right? And that's not a message you really want to give when you're first meeting somebody. So it's a very inappropriate response for girls. Some parents think, oh, that's great, they're instant, fast friends, but they're really not if they're having friendship problems. My 8-year-old daughter is very affectionate. She won't do that. She will hug another girl when she first meets, briefly. And she's unusual, and the other girls seem to like that. But she already knows them. It isn't somebody she just met. And it's very endearing, too, because it really does, she's unusual that way, but she knows who to hug and who not to hug. She certainly doesn't hug kids that she doesn't like, but also she's got to know them. They after a while, they reciprocate, too, like they'll hug her. So it's kind of cute watching girls do that. Boys, I've never seen that done with boys.
Natalie has a question here. This happens a lot with ADHD children. My daughter gravitates toward befriending younger children. This leads to her serving as the alpha member of the relationship, and the other friend simply follows her instructions. I have been hesitant to discourage these friendships because these are the only ones she has. Do you have any advice on this?
Yeah. So the parents, is it Natalie, who's observed that is right on. It is it can be dysfunctional. If it's a year difference in age, it's not too bad, but maybe the reason they're being friends is because this is somebody that the girl can boss around, and she has control. And the good host playdate rules will basically eliminate that if she follows it. The idea is to not necessarily to discourage the friendship, but if it evolves into a friendship where it's mutual give and take, the age doesn't matter so much. Another thing I should mention about children with ADHD is they're immature, typically. And you subtract a year or two off their chronological age to get their kind of social age. So that having younger friends is actually not so bad. Academically, they may be very bright, but emotionally and socially, they may actually be more comfortable with slightly younger kids. And I mean just about a year or so. So the age difference isn't necessarily problematic. It's the give and take part that is problematic. And the playdates, if they happen, have to be heavily supervised to make sure that the guest gets to pick the game. And sometimes they get kids who are so subservient that they won't make a choice themselves, so that the parent has to step in and say, okay, ask her what she wants. And when you're asking them, for food or even anything, make sure your child doesn't answer first. You're going to wait for her so you don't influence her response, the guest. So again, I go over this in my book in more detail, but I'm touching on it now.
Right. Michelle, a mother, is asking, my 8-year-old has ADHD, and even though he is a happy kid and friendly, he doesn't play with anyone during his recess at school and doesn't like to work in groups during class. Should I worry about this? It doesn't seem to bother him.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. If it really doesn't bother him, maybe he doesn't he doesn't need friendships. I haven't found a child like that, although theoretically that's possible. My 11-year-old daughter, is an introvert, and she's also a tomboy, and she loves to read, and she could spend hours reading. So the question, I struggle with this too, is she reading? Well, she loves to read. But if she's reading during recess, then I think I get more worried that it's replacing intimacy, which I think she could benefit from. I think every child could benefit from it. So ask the question again, because I think I just lost my train of thought here.
Oh, it's basically, should I orchestrate play dates and force friendships on him when he seems perfectly happy not to have them, or playing alone? He seems happy and friendly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we've had kids like that in the group, and we advocate the parents to try the play date to see what happens.
Uh-huh.
And if the kids light up and say, "Oh, that's wonderful, and I want to have one of these again," then you're onto it. Oftentimes we find, though, they're happy on the play date, but they're not particularly motivated to make another play date, and that's okay too. You just have to pick kids that they like. In the mutual interests, I think, are the things that hopefully will grab them. If they are interested in, say, dinosaurs or some fictional characters like Harry Potter, and they find somebody who's as interested as them, you should actually have trouble stopping them from talking about their mutual interest, in which case you're on the right track. So, there's basically two responses to that. One is give them a chance to see if they really like it, because maybe they aren't informed enough to choose. And the second thing is it may be a mutual interest problem, and so that's where you should go find kids with mutual interests. Probably both of them are the solution.
Mm-hmm. Several parents have asked, what about high school kids where you really can't do play dates anymore? Monica, I guess, son does scouts and cross country, rock climbing currently, but he still doesn't have many friends. Another one asks, Andrea, what do you suggest for teenagers? He's on a high school soccer team, but he doesn't have the social skills to really make friends. Any suggestions for teens?
Yeah, that's a problem too, is in terms of your monitoring. So one thing there's the first question was about a child who didn't have many friends. Mm-hmm. And the answer is you don't have to have many friends. Actually, the long-term research shows one or two best friends is all you need. You don't have to be a wildly popular kid. In fact, it's of very little significance for long-term adjustment. But if you have one or two friends and they're really good friends, then I would encourage that. And the next thing is, how do you monitor a teen play date? And here are a couple of tricks. They do tend to want to go to the mall and stuff like that, but so you want to make your home attractive to them, and violate some of our rules of a good host, and encourage some video games, some, but not the whole thing, and offer lots and lots of junk food. And and the beauty of offering junk food is, I mean, a lot of parents discourage it, so you're one up on that, but also don't give it to them all at once. So what you're doing is bringing in junk food periodically, and that's where you do your observations to see how things are going. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how to do it. In other words, try and get them away from the mall and into your home, watching media and so on, but maybe not all the time. If it's the trouble with kids, they get really fixed on, mainly boys, get fixed on these video games, and they're quiet and playing it, and that's really should be discouraged. The media is more a normal, integral part when a lot of teens get together, boys get together anyway, and so some of it should certainly be allowed. I mean, we don't stick to that for older kids in the teen group. If they have no friends, then I would re-examine the activity itself and see if it's productive, because it's certainly going to be taking up time. And maybe there should be another better activity where there are kids more like the boy or girl that you were asking about, and they could more easily strike up friendships. But then there's a lot of groundwork to be done in terms of conversational skills. Are they reasonable conversationalists? Do they only talk about themselves or not talk at all? In which case, the kids need to work on their conversational skills. So I guess,
what would be some strategies for improving conversational skills?
Well, the playing detective is always a good strategy. It doesn't have to be about interest. It could be about what they did recently. The idea is to get the other person talking and show that you're interested in what they have to say. And the way you do that is not only about asking questions directly related to what they've already said, but commenting positively on what they're talking about, so it makes them feel better, and ultimately winding up with a suggestion on what to do next that you both enjoy in common.
Mm-hmm. A couple of parents have asked, are there any other evidence-based programs like the UCLA Friendship Program? Is there a directory? Do you know of any others? Because a lot of people are just mentioning that they don't live in LA or near LA, and they want access to a program in their area. Is there a directory?
No, I haven't put together a directory, and I don't really know who's doing it, because my treatment manual is for sale to anybody who wants it on Amazon, and people have bought it and done groups. I Google the internet for children's friendship training, and I come up with people who are doing it in different areas, and sometimes they run it over the summer, sometimes they run it all year round. There's a place in Las Vegas, for instance. There's a group that's doing it there. There's a group in Washington. The Mayo Clinic, actually, there are two groups that have replicated our work in journals that I have no contact with. They just did it based on the manual. And and another possibility is if you have an interested therapist who would like to learn it. The manual is pretty well laid out so that you don't need to come and listen to me talk to do this kind of program. You read the manual. It's pretty well self-contained. It's how-to. It's a step-by-step. The parent handouts are there. Examples of how things go right are there. Examples of how things go wrong and what to do about them are there. And the manual is called Children's Friendship Training. It's Routledge as the publisher.
Routledge. That's R-O...
Routledge.
Okay,
Routledge.
Good.
Yeah.
And that's available on Amazon?
Amazon. Amazon.
Okay. A father asks, my son has more friends who are girls. Is it okay to invite them over for a play date? Doesn't talk about the age or anything like that. Let's just assume a middle schooler.
Well, you could, although what we've done is run into boys who play with girls. And again, there may be the same issue, is the girls are complacent, compliant, and the boys basically boss them around, if it's a younger crew, in which case the same feedback applies as what I talked about before. Kids start to get together and the different genders start to approach each other again in high school, towards the end of middle school. But it's boys and girls. And but in terms of elementary school kids, they generally can't play with each other during recess. That they'll be teased or whatever, or it'll be uncomfortable. The boys definitely don't want to invite a girl in unless she's a tomboy into their games. And the girls might want to, but that'll single the boy out among the other boys. And in terms of long-term adjustment, same-gender friendships are important because there are different skills. There's a slightly different skill set you need for boys than for girls. That will get you through life if you're a boy.
Speaking of gender differences, do girls in general in middle and elementary school find it easier to make best friends than boys?
That's an interesting question. Let's start off by saying that 3 times as many boys have social problems than girls, at least in terms of showing up at our clinic door. So it's certainly more common. Of course, ADHD and autism, the 2 major contributors to social problems, are more common in boys. So that may account for part of it. It is generally harder to break into girls' groups than it is to break into boys' groups. So if boys are playing a game, they're more open-ended in terms of who they'll include. Girls, on the other hand, are not. And we thought when we were first starting the group that it would be extremely difficult to get girls' friends, because the girls tend to be so cliquish, but it hasn't turned out to be true.
Right.
There are slightly different rules for peer entry into girls playing that girls have to attend to than boys. And if they attend to that, it might work for them. But actually, the girls should try and make friends on an individual basis rather than try and join a group. And that's the biggest mistake that girls make is they're left out of a group and they want the group to accept them. And that just doesn't happen with anybody. If you want to be accepted by a group, you have to make inroads on an individual basis. And it has to be inroads based on mutual interests. Not, it's like the popular group and everybody wants to join. Actually, that's a goal that's not worthy to go after, is to try and be popular for popular sake. You're really not interested in the people. You're interested in the social status. And the way we work it is we want best friends who are interested in each other as individuals, not because they're popular.
Mm-hmm. Anne Cecile has an ADHD son. She asks, our 10-year-old son only has one friend he is interested in having play dates with, but that boy doesn't invite our son to play dates. Anything we can do to influence this? They play well together, but the other boy just doesn't
So it's not a mutual friend.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a mutual friend. So he's invited over but never reciprocates.
Right.
And he accepts, and he probably has other priorities. Or maybe he's one of those kids that were asked about before that's not much interested in making play dates with anybody. But in either case, he's not a good source to rely on exclusively. And again, in my book, I deal with this issue. You have to have him branch out and pick more than one child to have play dates with. You can make a deal with them. All right, we'll make a play date with Oscar next time, but first you have to pick somebody else for a play date first. And you make that play date first, and then we'll make one with Oscar, and you can alternate. So this way he's got a few more. And then if you have a larger selection, then you basically go shopping around in the selection and see, when you're monitoring the play date, which play dates work out the best, and then start inviting those kids over and ask your child. And sometimes they're so stuck on one kid that it does interfere with acquisition. But so far, I haven't found that it's really so much an obsession as a comfort thing, that they know this kid will say yes, and they're afraid to reach out to other kids. And if you help them do it, oftentimes that sort of breaks the ice so that they have a wider range of playmates. Mm-hmm.
A bunch of parents have asked, they do all the training and talking about good behaviors and strategies to make and keep friends. But when it comes to the actual play, the child doesn't reflect them. And this parent asks, when I try to give gentle reminders, he gets angry, embarrassed, and can make his behavior worse. He's 11 years old. What more can I do to help him?
So he needs, more. I don't know what level of supervision they're talking about, but we're talking about in our intervention that the parent is listening all the time and jumping in when there's a social infraction and taking him out. And if he doesn't cooperate, giving him a timeout or whatever the disciplinary procedure is to get him to comply. And if they can't, then the compliance is the issue more than the friendship is. And they need to work on techniques to get the child to comply. The intervention that's best for that is something called parent training, behavioral parent training, where they look at consequences that are more effective. And maybe they need to go to that first and get their consequences up to par. And then basically take them out of play date and keep them out until they agree to do what they're doing. And if they start doing it again, taking them out again. It's no good having them continue to play and making bad choices to a friend whom they may burn bridges with. And the other kids actually are pretty good about waiting, because they'd much rather have a nicer playmate after the timeout than keep playing in a very disagreeable way.
Mm-hmm. That was good advice, very good advice. Kristen is a single parent with ADHD myself, and her house is extremely messy and very small, so I don't like to have play dates at my house. Are play dates at a park or other activities still helpful, or do we need to start at home?
It's better at home because you have exclusive access to your guest. And a park, especially a neighborhood park where you're likely to see other kids they're going to approach and want to join in. And the messy part is part of childhood. Our house is messy, and we periodically clean it up. And after a play date, it's a total disaster. And we don't insist that anybody clean up during a play date. We want them to have fun. Maybe we should. I don't know. I'm certainly open to that. But then, it depends on how much cleaning up you want to do. And I help. Usually, I have to clean up. My kids have to clean up their own stuff. But after a play date where the guest makes at least half of the mess, then I volunteer to help them clean up. So they shouldn't do the whole thing. Otherwise, it discourages play dates. Mm-hmm. So in terms of a messy house, I know a lot of kids. That's where they live. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. They're messy. However, if there are parents who, for instance, parents who aren't doing well economically, that live in a very tight quarters, perhaps with lots of adults there and doing different things, and so their only option is the park. And the way kids handle that in the park is very interesting, because what you do is you tell your child that if anybody approaches them, that they say, "Hi, how you doing? We're on a play date right now. I'll get back to you later." All right. And so that actually helps quite a bit. I've seen that work very well. And it's very impressive. You still have to monitor this play date. And we had one like this with my younger daughter, and her friend, the guest actually had somebody come over and start talking. And the parents actually were even encouraging this, which I don't blame them for. And the friend said to this other kid, "I'm on a play date now." And, that really does help self-esteem on the guest and the host to do that kind of thing, that we're exclusive right now. And the other kid understood it. There was another kid, however, who didn't understand it. And my advice, I took them aside and I said, "Ignore her." And eventually she stopped asking to get in. All right. And I thought that was totally fine. Right. She didn't take the hint. And I am only responsible for my child. I'm not responsible to educate the world, unless, of course, they're coming to me for social skills training.
Right. This will be the last question, I think. What about if your child plays well with another child, but the parents don't like you and refuse a play date? Should you discourage that friendship?
You are in deep trouble. Yeah, because the parent thing is very important. And there was one girl whose parents said they were they told us they were opposed to having like best friends. That their philosophy was that their girl should be like a social butterfly, and right. So they basically told us no. And so we told our daughter, look, they're not really interested in play dates. You can play with her at school and have a good time, and that's still okay, because we're in a small town, and the high school, there's only one high school, and eventually these kids will get together if they're still friends at that time, and something will gel there because the parents have a lot less to do with it in adolescence. And, right. And if it's a good kid, then you don't want to discourage it if the child is a nice kid. Right, right. Although, again, I wouldn't be trying to make play dates. I think I would take the hint there, but still, it's okay for them to play together. And at recess, oftentimes the kids are playing more in groups anyway. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you, Fred, for all of your insights and strategies. It provided great stuff, I think. So I appreciate you coming, and thanks again. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. And have a good day, everyone.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.